Welcome to the HR Huddle podcast, presented by Sapient Insights Group, the ultimate resource for all things HR. It's time to get in the huddle.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to the HR Huddle podcast. And to this episode of HR We Have a Problem. I'm your host, Kim Seals, and today we're celebrating spooky season in the way any true HR professional knows how, by swapping horror stories from the human resource department. In this episode, we'll clear away the cobwebs on some of our most haunting encounters, from eerie employee behavior to petrifying policy violations and bosses from the netherworld. To leave you with strategies you can use should you ever find yourself or your organization in similar spine-chilling situations. Here to gather around the HR Huddle campfire with me, with plenty of terrifying tales to tell, is a special guest and dear friend. She is the managing partner and principal of HR and People Strategy at Peridus Group, one of HR Executive Magazine's top 100 HR tech influencers for 2 years running now, and Huffington Post named her one of the top social HR experts on Twitter. But my favorite part, she lives in Louisiana, and she's a fan of the New Orleans Saints. Welcome to the show, Robin Schooling.
Ooh, I'm so glad to be here. Since you said that, I could toss out a hoodat to get us going.
You can. And Robin, if only I could get you to cheer for my LSU Tigers, then you'd be perfect.
Sorry. We're on the dark side in our household here.
I don't understand how you're allowed out in the streets of Baton Rouge if you're not an LSU Tiger fan.
It's dicey every now and again. And my husband has an Alabama mask as well. And so anytime we're in the grocery store or the gas station or whatever, inevitably there's comments.
Look, that takes your life in your own hands sometimes when you walk around in your Alabama gear in Baton Rouge.
Yep.
I'm very proud of his bravery. All right, Robin, let's kick it off here. Let's start with one of your best HR nightmares.
Oh, man. It's kind of fun when we hit this time of year because I think in HR, we just go to those horror stories naturally every Halloween time. So I was thinking through some scenarios over the number of years I've been in HR, and I realized that the bathroom is the epicenter of horror in the workplace. It's
in more ways than one.
Yeah, it's like the red room in the basement of the Amityville Horror House kind of a thing. It's like everything bad happens in the bathroom. And over the years, I have dealt with various bodily fluids, primarily feces, on floors and walls and doors. At one organization, it was this squabble amongst these middle-aged women, and one of them decided to take it upon herself to take pictures of the remnants of her coworkers' bowel movements and things that had not flushed completely.
Oh.
And so she took her cell phone in the bathroom, took pictures, and then proceeded to go back to her coworkers in this department and show everybody the picture. Look at what Susie left in the toilet bowl.
Oh, gosh.
Look what's in there. Oh, my gosh, look at this. And showed it to everybody. And so the employee who had, just been doing her regular bodily functions, got wind of this, obviously, fairly quickly, and came down to my office just in tears. I could scarcely believe this. Again, both of these women were in their 50s. So I opened my investigation file, right, and proceeded then to talk to a couple of employees who were witnesses, and then I finally talked to the photographer herself, who readily admitted it, showed me pictures on her phone, and told me that she felt the need to do this because the coworker was, quote, a dirty bird. And everybody needed to know it. Yeah. So the photographer was, within very short order, like about 10 minutes, no longer employed with us.
The employee who had this happen to them, what do you do with that person now, right? Because they're obviously feel like they've been mortifyingly embarrassed in front of their coworkers. How do you save that employee? Because, when these horror stories happen, a lot of times I recognize that no matter who's right or wrong, we may end up losing both employees. Any advice for a newbie HR person who might be trying to deal with a situation like this?
Yeah, in this particular situation, the employee who had the pictures taken was long-term. I mean, years and years and years and years. As were many of the employees in the department. The photographer was relatively new and so had kind of come in and upset the apple cart in a number of ways. This was just the most egregious, so there had kind of been some toxic, normal bullshit behavior from this new employee anyway. This was the tipping point. So the saving grace in this particular case was this was a long tenured employee. And as soon as it came to light, from start to finish, from the moment I got wind of it until this woman was being walked out the door, was about 3 to 4 hours.
Okay.
So it was quick,
Speedy,
it was rapid, because she admitted it, done. So I think to the employee who was the victim in this, and then by extension, everybody else on the team, the company's not going to put up with this stuff. And they do have our back. And when somebody does something that's toxic and hurtful, the company's going to act. And we did it the right way because everybody knew this was not just a he said, she said. There was an investigation. Fast, but there was an investigation. So there was confidence that we would take action. That, coupled with the employee who had been affected, obviously followed up with her first and said to her, what are you comfortable with? Do you want me to go in and put my HR lady hat on and talk to everybody on the team? And she said, no, it's fine. Everybody will know what happened. So it was also bringing her into it.
Right.
And it ended up being just a cleanse in many ways across the department.
No pun intended, right?
Literally. Another lesson in there for HR is sometimes it's okay to move this stuff fast. Putting somebody on suspension and we're investigating and we're getting witness statements and we're looking at tapes or records or whatever. It didn't need to even be you're suspended and we'll deal with you later. It was like, no, this is ridiculous. You're gone.
If only all of our HR investigations were that clear cut, right?
Yeah.
Well, speaking of stinky episodes, I have one to share with you and see what you think. At a company who shall be nameless that I worked with, we had a situation where a lady in one of the departments was convinced that her coworkers were all sniffing her, that they would walk around and sniff her and that they thought she had body odor. And as you probably have experienced, I have talked to people managers who'd rather fire somebody than to try to talk to them about if they have body odor, right?
Oh, the worst.
The worst, right? She had come down to HR. She had said, hey, my coworkers are sniffing me. And we were like, oh, okay, how can we help? We're HR and we're here to help.
Let me leave it and smell.
Yeah, so went and looked into it, could find no real evidence that anybody was sniffing her, smelling her, talking about her. Let her know that, try to get her comfortable with it, engage with her people manager to, try to figure this out. But we were kind of baffled. So a couple weeks go by and the people manager calls me and he says, I need your help. She's decided she's going to resign and she has posted her resignation letter on the bulletin board. And it's in big, bold letters like, you won't have to deal with my smelly ass anymore because I'm leaving. There was other stuff in the letter, but that was the gist of it was, you think I smell? So let me take my stinky ass somewhere else. Well, the best part is the people manager has decided that he's going to investigate this himself. So he's taking pictures. He's trying to put it in a little plastic envelope, like we're going to fingerprint it. I don't know what he thought we were going to do. It's like,
CSU.
Yeah, dude, we're just going to take it down. Like, that's what we're going to do. We're going to take it down. And then we're going to reach out to her and we're going to see how we can help her and how can we best support her. If she would like to leave, okay, understandable, but make sure she knows about resources we have as a company, perhaps something else going on with her where we can be supportive and encouraging of her. But it was a first for me where we had somebody post it on the bulletin board, right? Still no evidence that anybody thought she was stinky, but clearly she did. So those are the best.
Well, and that does bring to mind another good point as kind of a lesson from your story there of even when we have these strange ways that people resign or they flounce out of an organization, we still do our part to say to them, here are some follow-up resources, but it's the human part of that offboarding piece. This is going to sound like an HR class now, but so many times where somebody is leaving who may have these issues where it's like, you know what, here's a resource for you. Even once you're gone, you can still access them.
For sure. Yeah. Well, give us another spooky story, Robin. What else have you encountered in your HR background?
Oh, man. What is that movie? Got Vera Farmiga in it. they're like house exorcists. I can't think of the name of it. It's here in the last couple of years, and they've done a couple of them where they're out like exorcising houses. It's very popular. I watched it once. It terrified me. But they have this like demon nun.
Oh, The Conjuring. You're talking about The Conjuring.
The Conjuring. So that nun, right? I saw a picture of that the other day. So then it got me thinking about, I've worked for several Catholic organizations where I had staff members, employees who were priests, nuns, clergy were our employees. And it's kind of like when you work in healthcare and sometimes the nurses are like, they're the ones always like getting positive drug tests and stuff.
Yes, for sure.
My nuns and priests were like sometimes the hardest to kind of manage from sort of a performance standpoint. And at one organization, I had 2 nuns that actually reported to me. So I was their boss, and I was like, oh my God, I'm like the boss of a nun. What do I do?
That's a lot of pressure, Robin. That's a lot of pressure.
It was a lot of pressure. Sister Barb was one, and I can't think of the other one. So Sister Barb was like this jolly nun, right? And Sister, I can't think of her name.
Let's just call her Sister Sarah. Why don't we call her Sister Sarah?
Sister Sarah was the stereotypical mean nun that would wrap your knuckles with a ruler. And she was also not a particularly happy or very performance-oriented employee. And so I had to have regular performance discussions with her because she was on my team around her interaction with other employees and interaction with, this was a nonprofit, so clients that were coming in and government officials. She was just kind of stern and crabby. She was like this crabby Sister Sarah. And I finally had to terminate her.
Oh.
I mean, I'm very firmly of what can we do to support you? Let's get you where you need to do. What can I do? You've got to help yourself, but what do you need? So we spent quite a bit of time kind of trying to get her there. It truly became very apparent that she didn't want to change or wouldn't change. And so I had to terminate her. And I thought, you're
going to hell.
Going straight to hell. And she's going to haunt me like this demon nun in The Conjuring, Even though this was years before The Conjuring, but whenever I see like a scary nun, that's who I think of as her. So it was tough. And I was relatively young. It was actually my first HR director role. And so this was my first time I had a team that I was managing myself. I was learning as I was doing. Really brought into place with me. You're going to manage people who are vastly different from you. And you may manage people who intimidate you, whether they're more experienced than you or they're Jesus's bride or whatever you believe, And, you just kind of have to know that it's okay. Don't be intimidated. You're there to do a job. You're there to build a team. You go in, you try to support them. You try to get them from point A to point B, and you do your best. It may take time to really help somebody turn that curve, but you can do it.
But sometimes you're helping them by helping them move on to something they can be more successful at.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I've had people that I've had to terminate that have later come back to me and said, that's the best thing that's ever happened to me, because I then found the job where I was meant to be successful. So It can also be a relief for that poor performer because they know they're not performing. Yeah. They know the pressure is there. So, sometimes wrapping it up is the best answer for everybody. But Robin, I've got to tell you my own sort of nursing horror story, right? So we got a letter from the group that oversees nursing certifications. As you know, from a healthcare background, the nurses have to be registered. There's usually a state agency that regulates what happens. We got a letter that they were coming in to investigate a situation where one of our nurses had a patient care issue where there was a baby and then the baby rolled off the table in the hospital. And an anonymous tip had come in that the nurse was on some type of illegal substance when this happened. Now, we had no knowledge of any baby falling out of the bed or off the exam table or anything like that. So I get this letter, it comes to me, we're looking into it. I'm going to talk to our risk management folks. I'm like, did you investigate any issues? Do we know who this is? Because at this point, they just tell us they're coming in to look at our records. When the investigator shows up, we get the name of the nurse. We start to dig into it further. We then had to bring her in for the conversation with the investigator. Our lawyer's there. I'm there. And it turns out she's going through a separation with her husband. And he called in the anonymous tip and he made it up, Robin. He made the whole thing up because he was mad at her.
And he knew the hot place to go was the licensing.
The licensing place, and that would trigger some investigation, and he could, cause her some pain. So at the peak of the investigation, like the investigators come back and forth, as you know, this goes on for a while because it's such a serious allegation. Yeah. And we had to investigate whether any drugs were missing. This basically paralyzed our entire group of resources that needed to be investigating this for days. The guy decides he's going to come in and confess he made it all up, but the investigator's not necessarily buying that because could be making that up too, right?
Right.
So it's in the room is the employee who's been accused, her somewhat ex-husband, the investigator, the general counsel, and me. And we're sitting there, and the investigator is clearly perplexed about what's happening here. The he's crying. He's like, I screwed up. I was mad. This didn't happen. I have no evidence she's doing drugs. We had sent her down for a drug test. And we're like, look, you're going to be randomly drug screened for quite some time now, so get used to this. And in the midst of it, the investigator looks at the woman and he goes, so are you going to stay with this guy? And
marriage counseling disguised as an investigation.
So me and our general counsel were both like, what is happening? I looked at our employee and I said, please do not feel like you need to answer that question. And I was like, how do we get this back on track? And to your point, I was probably early to mid of my HR career, but it was like, this is such a personal issue. At this point, our CEO is engaged. And I was like, look, this appears to be a marriage gone wrong. Let's move on here and let them sort out their lives. Sometimes people just don't know all this behind the scenes shenanigans that goes on that HR gets trapped in the middle of. And by the time it's over, we know more about our employees personally than we ever want to know.
Right. Well, that's an interesting story, too, because I think about how many times over the years I would get a handwritten scribbled note under my door or inner office envelope typed, with all fingerprints wiped off it or something, but where, these anonymous complaints. And so often HR people will say, what do I do? I got this under my door and it says that this employee is doing this, or these two employees are having an affair, or, that seems to be a popular one always. If there's nothing to it, doesn't mean you have to go into a full-blown investigation of it, but, it happens a lot.
Yeah, for sure. Tell me your best sexual harassment or, some kind of investigation like that, because those are always the ones that come off the rails quickly.
They do come off the rails quickly. I've had a fair number of, I just like to call it sexy times at work things where
and not in a good sexy way, right?
And not in a good sexy way. People getting it on in various and assorted offices and conference rooms and sheds and whatnot. One that I think of, and this was probably one of my earliest harassment investigations. This organization I was at, we had one IT person, because not everybody had PCs even, right? Or, very few people even had email and this sort of thing. So it was one guy could kind of handle this. And people were still trying to figure out, how do I, get this to go to a network printer and, things of that sort. And so this IT manager had told a female employee she had something she needed to print on, 11 by 18 paper. And he said, the only place you can print that, which was not true, but she didn't know, was, you have to print it in my office. So whenever you need to print this, you email it to me and I'll print it for you. And so they had gotten into this habit, and this had been going on for about a year. And every time she needed to print this, a couple of times a week, she'd let him know. She'd go up, he'd print it out. There we go. Well, unbeknownst to any of us, there were other things going on every time she would go to his office, in that he was gradually starting to expose himself to her. She would come up and come into his office, and he would be sitting with his pants unzipped, and this kind of progressed until one summer. Right, we're having summer casual day. Everybody could wear shorts and flip-flops and whatever.
The good old days.
Right, and so he had shorts on. She went up to get her paper, and his little IT manager was sticking out the bottom of his shorts.
Oh, no.
And that's apparently what put her over the edge. And so it was a Friday. I'll never forget this. It was a Friday. And she went out for drinks after work with some other coworkers. And one of the coworkers was a female manager from another department. And so she was so upset from this shorts incident that she told the manager, not the entire group, oh my gosh, IT guy did this. What? Oh, yeah, he's been doing this for a year. What? And the manager said to her, you are kidding me. Have you gone and told Robin? Oh, no, oh, no, oh, no, I can't. And the manager said to her, you better. You go in there first thing Monday morning and you tell her. Because if you don't, by Monday at noon, I will be telling her, meaning me. And so Monday morning, that employee came down, told me the story. I think my jaw was dropping as she's like going through this whole entire year of stuff she had put up with and had never
Unbelievable.
said anything. Once she finally said it, the floodgates opened. I immediately went and told my executive director. We called the guy up, suspended him, said, we're investigating this. We'll go home. We'll be talking to you here in a couple of days. Come to find out, there had been a few people she had told over the years, like not manager types, talking to him and kind of getting his interview, if you will. He admitted it. Yeah, I've been doing that. Why? I don't know. So obviously he was fired.
Yeah, and thank
Obviously.
goodness your managers had been trained on what to do when they hear
yes.
about stuff, right?
Yes. And so that was just such a reiteration of how key it is that managers know their role.
Right.
And know when to escalate it, because that manager heard it and the first thing in her mind was, oh my God, have you reported this? If not, I will. It's my responsibility as a manager. Hallelujah for that. This was a really good workplace. Kind of hurt me that this woman felt she was alone for so long
Right.
and didn't feel that she could say anything to anybody. What can we do? And this is more prevalent today than ever, right? What can we do as employers to let our employees know it is safe for you to report this stuff?
Well, Robin, I feel like we couldn't let a show like this go by without me confessing one of my ultimate horror stories that has haunted me for years, right? And that's the time that I almost fired the wrong employee. So a situation was going on where one of the male employees at our company was being stalked by a female coworker. And apparently it had been going on before I arrived on the scene, and it had supposedly been dealt with. And the gentleman comes in and he says, she's back. She's stalking me again. And now she's made contact with my wife. I was like, okay, well, let's get on this. Let's figure it out. And he goes, I want you to handle this the way you would handle this if it was a guy stalking a lady. And I was like, I'm on it. Let me investigate. I go talk to the HR business partner who would have been involved back when this happened the first time. She's like, I can't believe this is happening again. She told us she would stop. But I was like, why is she still here? But okay. All right, so now I'm going to handle this one myself. Let's take a look at it. I had the letters that had been written. I had all this stuff. And I said to the HR business partner, can you give her a call, have her come into my office? I need to meet with her. So the lady comes in, and let's just call her Sarah again. Sarah rolls into my office, and I'm sitting there, and I'm like, I need to understand what's happening. I understand that this happened before. We now have these new letters. This is considered stalking. I'm going through it with her, like, help me with what's happening here. And we're still treating this as a confidential investigation, right? So, like, her manager's not really in. And the lady's like, I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't do this. She's, like, crying. And the letter was signed. And I was like, so are you telling me there's another lady here named, Sarah Smith? And she goes, well, actually, there is.
Oh,
and
no.
She works in this other department.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So with my best HR blank expression, I'm like, hold one moment. I leave my office. I go trotting down to the HR business partner. I'm like, is it at all possible I have the wrong person in my office? She's like, well, I thought I got the right one. And I was like, this is not something you just think you got the right one. Like, do I have the right lady in my office? And she's like, maybe you don't.
My Lord.
So then I make the walk of shame back to my office, right? And this lady's sitting there just hysterical. Why do people think I'm stalking this guy? I would never do that. How is this happening? Am I getting fired? And I said, this has been such a misunderstanding. My bad. No worries. You're good. Your manager doesn't even know you're in my office. We can make this better. And I said, why don't you just take the rest of the day off? I'm going to call your manager and tell your manager you're not feeling well. She leaves. They get the right lady in, and I go through the whole, and it's like, yep, that's me. Okay, we're done here. Wrap this up. Get her out. Meanwhile, the other lady is so distraught. She goes out on medical disability, Robin.
Oh, no. Oh,
That
no.
I have caused her so much stress and trauma. I had them send flowers to her house apologizing. I mean, I did everything I could. And then she went out on some kind of short-term disability for stress-related stuff. And I have to go tell our CEO what I've done. It was horrible. It haunts me to this day. And now it's like, are we sure we have the right person? Like step one in an investigation, do we have the right person?
Thus, the prevalence of employee numbers in HRIS systems, because I've worked in organizations where we've had 5 John Smiths, and sometimes even with the same middle initials,
Which Sarah is our stalker. Let's get the right one.
Yes. Oh.
I wanted to fire the HR business partner. Ultimately, did not end up doing that. But man, was my confidence in that person really gone, right?
No, kid.
There's nothing more important we can do as HR people than handle these types of matters professionally, confidentially, quickly, to your point. When we get it wrong, it's bad. There were a lot of lessons learned from me that day, too.
Oh, man. Yeah, no kidding.
Well, Robin, any final spooky tales for us today?
One category that we didn't really talk about is the horrors brought about by our managers sometimes.
Yes.
They have their role to play in creating some of these horror situations that we have. And we're sitting here at Halloween, so I've been reading some new Stephen King that I got to thinking about other Stephen King books. And I was like, ooh, which one can I reread for Halloween? And he had the one Thinner. Remember Thinner? And it was about the guy that lost all this weight and everything. Brought to mind this company that I was working with. They were self-insured with their medical plan. There's pluses and minuses with that. But on the positive side, it's like you really can kind of drive home the message of be good consumers of your health care, go and find a good doctor, pay attention to your prescriptions, whatever. On the negative side, it means that the company is so focused on cost containment because you see every cost. You're writing a check every time somebody gets a $1,500 prescription versus a $800 prescription. So this particular organization, self-funded, very, very conscious and mindful of these costs, but they took it to the extreme and tied these health costs towards our bonus eligibility. And the CEO's take on this was, well, people just need to be healthier. And
if only it were that easy, right?
Right. And mind you, this was in Louisiana where we are not necessarily the healthiest. We don't have the greatest health record here in Louisiana. Well, we just need to hire healthier people. Meaning what exactly? Well, if we hire people that are thinner, they'll be healthier, says the CEO who was a runner and protein shakes and a weightlifter and all this kind of stuff. We just need to hire healthier people. And how do you propose we do that? His proposal was that from the initial screening of candidates undertaken by the recruiting team through the interview process with the hiring managers, everybody should make a determination that people could not be overweight. And so we just need to hire thinner people.
Yeah, because that won't go wrong anywhere. Go wrong anywhere.
So we're going to screen them. I want the recruiting team to screen out fatties. And then, if somehow they get to a hiring manager, then it's the hiring manager who is responsible for not hiring anybody over X body shape type of thing. As this conversation unfolded, again, here I think was another, if my jaw was not hanging open, it was in my mind of just how absolutely horrific it could be.
So you think they should have added a BMI number to their application? You could report your BMI on your way in?
He probably would have liked that. And I said, so if you want to go for health and well-being, why don't we start with this very fundamental post-offer physical to make sure you're healthy and tied to the job, right? I said, and that'll cost us about, based on the people we hire into those positions and X cost per post-offer physical would probably be, tens of thousands of dollars a year. Oh, well, no, we don't want to pay that. I said, well, there you go. If you want to open some sort of physical capabilities, and here's how that can be done. But no one is going to take a look at applicants marching through the HR department and decide pass, fail because they're thin or not.
You know what? He probably thought that was one of the most brilliant ideas he'd ever had.
Oh, I'm sure he did.
Our roles in HR would be awesome if not for having to deal with people.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Robin, on that note, I feel like we should wrap this up before we both have nightmares tonight, right? I want to thank you again for joining us. I could not have summoned a better guest for this HR Fright Fest.
Summoned, I like it.
If you want to hear more of Robin's expertise, or your organization needs some help navigating some HR nightmares of your own, head over to peridusgroup.com and check out Robin's company, or connect with her online via robinschooling.com and follow her on Twitter @robinschooling. I can guarantee you won't be disappointed.
Oh, Kim, this was fun. Thanks so much.
Be sure to subscribe to the HR Huddle podcast and tune in weekly to our other shows, Spilling the Tea on HR Tech with Stacey Harris, and Per My Last Email, where we dig into what's broken in diversity, equity, and inclusion with Pam Jeffords.